Connie Willis, the podcast. Taking you into new ways of thinking, even providing answers to questions you've often pondered. Connie Willis, the podcast. This is a Connie Willis exclusive. Whistleblower. What you're about to hear has never been heard anywhere else. This is Connie Willis, the podcast.
Connie Willis back with the private military, government contractor, and U.S. Navy Special Warfare veteran. Robert Treat is with us discussing his life, his background, and what he sees for the future and what he has learned along the way that he's going to tell us about. Go to the GoFundMe that is in the description.
Informant.
So when we get to the Troika, where you're 26, 27, and he asks you, Glenn, right, asks you to be the third in Troika, and you say yes, and this is where you get to a point of, I don't think you've decided, you're starting to see the whole picture yet, but you have an experience, you said.
Yeah, and I had these experiences all through childhood on a regular basis, but they were always good. It was always good, and they got very, very good. But what happened there was different. These were different craze. They're not ubiquitous. So, when people talk about, of the grays, as if they're just a one-size-fits-all, they are absolutely not. I learned that day at Troika that there are distinctly two groups of grays, and one group is not nice at all.
When this thing happened that you're about to tell us about, were you even aware that you were taken all your life, or did all that come later?
Oh no, I was aware.
You were always aware.
They never blanked me. They never ever blanked me. They always let me be.
Did you ever talk about it with other people that, hey, I get taken by aliens, and did you ever discuss that with anybody?
I talked about it once with some kids from school, and that ended up in my first and only playground fight, and I never discussed it again.
Was that in Iran?
No, that was in Scotland.
Oh, okay. I only asked that because the one guy said something about the kids you played with in Iran. So I'm just wondering. No, okay.
I was telling these other kids about it. This one kid said I was a liar.
Oh.
And I broke his nose.
Oh, okay. Oh, I won't say that to you ever. So now you're in this Troika, and you say this event occurs, but you're familiar with it, kind of, but it's, wait a minute, this is somebody else because they're not nice.
Yeah, in my childhood experiences, I would go voluntarily, and I would even ask to be taken. But the other group that took me, this was a straight up abusive kidnapping, and their ship was nothing like the other ones that I'd been on.
Did the Greys look the same? Or was there a difference?
Mostly, they looked degenerate. Kind of like the difference between a supermodel and a meth head.
Ooh.
Yeah. They didn't smell the same. They smelled moldy.
Ooh.
Their ship was dirty. There was no feelings of compassion. Just if I felt anything from it, it was malice. And I was just nothing but a thing to be studied. And when they dropped me off and when they returned me, they dumped me in a field naked in the winter, and it was cold. They didn't have the decency to give my clothes back.
And you feel this was a different group? Okay, so it's interesting.
It was a different group.
I definitely understand that, but is it because of this new work or something? Why all of a sudden did this weird group come? come in outside of the nice ones.
Well, this is where I started to learn really the overall the scope of these sightings and these beings. They've been here for a very long time. Really predating even the creation of the human race. And these two groups, they'd split. Right? And it reminded me now it reminds me a lot of the stories of the mythological stories that we hear. I'm like, this is the foundation of all of it. And it's just all distorted through human eyes and retelling. And it made me think of, the game Chinese Whispers, when you go around the room and then a sentence ends up nothing like it began.
Yeah.
That's when I realized that our entire culture, our entire civilization is nothing but one big game of Chinese whispers.
Yeah. We call that a operator, I think, or something like that. And
Oh, really?
Yeah. You start like 15 kids and the teacher would whisper one thing in the first kid's ear, and then they'd pass it on, right, and it'd say something at the total, you'd say what you heard at the end, right, and it would be something totally different. She would say, I'm going to eat an apple pie, and by the time each kid whispered it along the way, it was, I'm going to grandmother's house tomorrow.
Yeah.
Similar to that, is that the same thing you're talking about?
Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm very much thinking about and remembering the experiences I had when I was younger. They call them abductions. I never really related to it being an abduction. It felt more like a rescue, and like I said, I'd even request it. And that started. That first one was at 5 years old, but I began to be regularly taken after that.
It sounded like yours was more of a friendly, and they talked with you, what were they doing? Were they still like giving you like a checkup kind of thing?
Yeah, I eventually did ask them, what the tests were for, because the abductions as a child, they always began with, this examination, this test, and sometimes it hurt and sometimes it didn't. I asked, what it was for, and I was just told it was necessary. But after a few times of it happening, they stopped treating me like a pet at the vet. That I'm just there for a purpose, and following when the tests were complete, which only really took a few minutes. It wasn't any huge thing. The only painful part was when they would push that needle through the roof of my mouth. That hurt. But they always calmed me down and took the pain away. It just hurt for a moment, but it was kind of scary watching that thing coming into your mouth and knowing it's going to hurt. But following that, they would kind of let me just hang out.
What did you see when you hung out?
I got to explore around the ship, and bear in mind, I'm looking at this through the eyes of a child,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm just fascinated with. I'm not really asking who are you, where did you come from, or any of these things that an adult would ask. I'm more curious, from the mind of a child. How does this work? Why are the walls the way they are? I was fascinated with the walls. Everything was the same color, the same metal, the same tone, hue. And one of the things about the walls of the ships were they weren't always solid. You could see through them.
Oh.
And they were also the source of light. Right? So if they chose, you could see right through the bottom of the ship, or right through the walls of the ship, or right through the ceiling. And they would also emit the light. Like the entire ceiling of the examination room, which was, I estimate, between 30 and 50 feet. It's hard to gauge as a child how the size. But, remembering through the eyes of an adult, remembering back, I would say it was probably, between 30 and 50 feet, the size of the room on this ship. but the ceiling was like an inverted dome, not a dome up, but a dome coming down. And the entire ceiling would glow like a light bulb, but it was the whole material. And there was no shadows. I remember noticing that was the first things I noticed as a kid was there's no shadows from this light. I found that fascinating.
This is a Connie Willis exclusive on Connie Willis, the podcast.
I mean, just the whole thing. I mean, it's like just imagining why even have a wall? What's there a wall for if you go through it or you can see through it? It's like why would there be any type of compartmentalization? But I guess there's some sort of organization to it.
I mean, it was solid. It was a solid surface, but it was, it was translucent when it needed to be, and
Oh, when it needed to be. Oh, I got you. Okay.
like it wasn't always like that.
That's amazing.
There were no windows, right? There were no windows. But if they wanted to see out, you could, like a one-way mirror or a two-way mirror.
Were there other kids or people, other humans?
I never saw any other humans, but I did see other hybrids, other types of grays, and I learned who they were. There was the short classic ones that everybody talks about, and then there were these slightly taller ones, and I had my own names for them.
What were your names for them?
One of the names I was given that I latched onto was the taller ones. People call them overlords, and I heard the term archons.
Archons, okay.
I had no idea what that meant, and I still really don't. But they were the taller ones, and they seemed to be like the chiefs or the sergeants. They kind of ran the smaller ones who were more drone-like, but they were capable of communication, but they were more functionaries, right?
Did somebody give you the name Archon, or did they tell you they were called Archons?
I don't really know how I got that in my head.
Okay.
But that's what I just came to identify them as.
So the little ones and then the bigger ones, and what else was on the ship?
Not on that ship. On the ships that were here, that I was on around Earth, we're all pretty much the same type, same general size, and same general crew. And like I said, I used to look forward to going with these beings, and I would sneak out of my window. In our house there in Scotland, it bordered this farm called the Penny Farm, and on that farm was a forest. In that forest was an old medieval peasant's cottage, and I would sneak out of my window and I would go to that cottage. I'd wait for them, and this would be several times a week. I would go out and do that, and sometimes I'd only be with them for a few hours, and sometimes it was for a few days, and my parents never seemed to miss me when I was gone.
Yeah. Wow, it's opening my eyes to a lot of things, of going back to the fact that people that are taken, even if it involves, like, maybe you are the only one taken, but there's other people around you just at the time, and let's say you're supposed to be having a birthday party, and you don't attend it. You're coming up to the door to open, to bring the gift and the balloons to this birthday party you're going to, of your friends and, family, whatever. Let's say there's 8 people in the house that you're going to knock on the door, and you're going to be a part of this birthday party, but you're taken, and you come back a couple hours later, and nobody even cares that you didn't show up. You at one point will go, "Hey, I missed the party. And I'm sorry I missed the party." And they're all like, "Oh, it's okay," or whatever. They didn't even notice. So it's interesting. I mean, this is what I've learned along the way, what I've experienced and seen myself. And here you are saying the same thing of that, nobody really recognizes too much about you being gone or what's going on. It just
And I was glad for it, frankly, that they didn't give me a hard
absolutely.
time. And
Yeah. But isn't that interesting though that they didn't? That's a
yeah,
big deal. That's to me the aliens turning off and on what these other people would think and normally do. It was just like no big deal, nothing to see here, kind of thing.
yeah. Well, my
That's
adopted
their control, I think.
yeah, and my adopted parents. I mean, they never wanted me in the first place. I really couldn't figure out why they adopted me. It was it was clear they
It
didn't want
is
me around or
interesting.
care. And I knew that from a very early age. And being with the Greys, and I get really emotionally choked up
Those were
about
your
them.
friends.
They were my family. I loved them.
Yeah.
I mean, I really did.
Yeah.
And I felt that they loved me. And it was and really to this day, it's the only love I've ever known came from them.
Keep in mind, you're not that's not the norm. Some people believe they're all about love, and other people are like, I was taken, I was raped, which brings us back to, let's go back to, you're 26, 27, and these evil Greys come your way.
And
And
I
yeah,
knew who they were, like right off the bat. As soon as I was taken, I knew that they were the fallen. I knew who they were.
when you say who they were and the fallen, what do you mean?
The Greys that do these horrible things and create these traumatic experiences are the ones who are more locked into this solar system. They're here. They're stuck here. They're not here by choice. Um, you know,
Disgruntled.
they're disgruntled. They're everything mythology lays out is evil. And they work with other races who are also kind of bound here. Um, the reptilians being one of them, and the fallen Greys work hand in hand with the reptilians, and the ones that the aliens of the governments. You hear talk about the government's working with the ETs. These are the ones they're talking about.
They're not working with the good ones, they're working with the bad ones?
Yes.
Only the bad ones? Is there somebody working with the good ones?
No.
The good ones don't want to work with the government, the bad ones do. They get
Yeah.
something out of it too.
Yeah. This is the war between the two camps of Greys, and it doesn't spill over into the other races. What people have labeled as the Nordics or the Plajarans or these other races of beings who largely stay out of it. But at some point in deep history, and I'm not sure when, if it was in the early days of man, there was a split between the Greys, where they were a unified. I don't know the right word for it. I wouldn't say coalition. I don't like to use the word race because they seem to be very different. The drones, the archons, and the primarchs all seem very different, but are related species. The primarchs are something else. They are the very, very tall ones. We're talking 15, 20 feet tall. These are big.
Hmm. And they
I've heard,
look like the thin alien look, but they're just
no,
tall. Okay.
I've heard people call them the mantids, but that's not an accurate description of them. They're I guess through terrified eyes, misinterpreting things, you could say it looks like a praying mantis, but not really.
Mm.
There's a vague similarity in head shape and features, but they don't have little pincer jaws and clawy arms. They're just big, and their heads and their eyes are very different from the smaller Greys.
They're nice or not nice? The mantids.
The one I interacted with was beautiful. I loved him.
Beautiful. Okay.
I thought he was beautiful, especially the eyes. And in meeting with him, which was only a few times, but the first time I met him, I was just overwhelmed with fear and love at the same time. I was awestruck, starstruck. Like if you met the your top movie star, Brad Pitt or whoever, you're just starstruck, right? That's how I felt towards him. Was just amazed. I wanted to spend the rest of my life at his feet.
So, okay, just because I want to get back into going in a straight line here just for a
Yeah,
minute because that's all great. I want to hear it, but I'm just trying to get to that point again. So, Troika, the bad ET, you have this experience with a bad ET. What happens there, which leads us to the mantid and all the other things that you were talking about in your knowledge. It seemed to be right there that you started to get into the other things, and it was right when you saw a bad one and you knew it was bad.
yeah, they were the ones that referred to as the fallen.
And what were they there for? What happened that there they were all of a sudden? Because it was like you were working on a project, right?
Yeah, I'd gone topside to smoke a cigarette, and I remember looking up in the sky, and I was looking up at the sky, and I thought, this is the kind of place where bad things happen.
Oh,
And right as I thought that, um,
a bad thing happened.
everything went blank,
Mm.
and the next thing I knew, I was naked in the field behind a generator shack. And I'd gone back down. I found my clothes, which were soaking wet for some reason. Found my clothes, scurried back down into the lab complex, and I was naked in the hallway with my wet clothes, and Randolph had come up, and he's like, "Where have you been? It's been 5 damn hours." And I just went topside to smoke a cigarette, and he's like, "You've been gone a long time." And asked me why I was naked, and I couldn't remember, so I went to my room. I went to my little suite, and as I was taking a shower and getting some clean, dry clothes, it started coming back to me what had happened. It's like they tried to blank me, but it didn't take. It lasted for a few hours, the blanking, where I couldn't remember, but I remembered. And just that experience just being around them was just terrifying, nauseatingly sick, and I developed this huge phobia where I couldn't be in my room. I would leave the door cracked open, and I would sleep on the floor in that sliver of light, because I did not want to be shut in there.
Mm.
And that lasted for quite some time, and it was there in that base after that event happened when I came across that book by Whitley Strieber, Communion.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd read the dust cover, about what the book was about, that he was, him and his family were abducted by extraterrestrials, and I got through like the first few chapters, and I couldn't read any more of that book. It was scaring me.
Well, you had said, and yeah, a lot of people, that's where they learn about it, through that book, right? But you had said you had remembered what happened. What do you remember? Why were you naked? Why were your clothes wet? What do you remember that happened?
I still don't remember why I was naked. I remember them, performing the same style of test, but these tests were very different. They didn't care if it hurt, and they were far more invasive. Whereas my previous experiences were just, very minor things, like, except for, the needle in the mouth. It was more of just like a physical examination you would take for a PE class,
So let me ask this. Do you think, okay, so you're a part of the lifer program, you're taking all your life. You're taken, whether you want to be a contactee. Well, you're like, you're a contactee. You want them to come. That's cool. You're fine with it. You're like, hey, come on down. And, as you know, there's contactee, abductee, experiencer, lifer. But lifer in general, that it's happening. You're one of these people that's going to happen to you all your life. It's always happened. Okay, what do you think is possible? I'm just throwing this out. And anything I say, if you've got something against it, please throw that out, because I'm here to learn, and I'm here to say, I may have a perspective that you might go, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Vice versa, you've got certainly a lot to tell. But do you think it's possible that as the program that you're being taken, let's just say, I'm not saying this is the case, but let's just say once a month you're being taken. Do you think that at one point maybe the same crew that came and got you all the time, maybe they just got another project, mission, whatever, and maybe the disgruntled ones came and were having to get you that next week, because you were on the schedule? You think it just anything like that where, somebody else had to fill in a substitute, or they had to change people because somebody quit? Do you know what I'm saying? You think that's a possibility? First of all, do you know what I'm saying, and do you believe that that's a possibility?
Yes, I understand what you're saying, and no, I don't.
No. Did the good guys keep coming back even after that?
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
The nature changed after I was 14. After I was already through the peak of puberty. But during those early abductions, which were regular, and like I said, I used to look forward to them and even seek them out. I did learn a lot. I knew why they were taking me. I knew what the tests were for. I knew what their objective was, and I knew what their plan for the future was.
Tell us all those things.
I had asked them what the tests were for. Why am I here? I had the questions any child would have. Where did I come from? Why am I here? What is the point of this? And it was explained to me that everything that we experience in this life, on this earth, right, is data they collect. And that data is, your experiences with the world, because we're being judged. They're judging the fitness of our species to survive. Do we have the right? Are we ever going to become the species that is going to be accepted as a spacefaring race like the rest of them? Or is the human race just too destructive to be allowed to survive? So when they do these tests, they're harvesting elements of your DNA that are data recording, storage, and retrieval mechanisms, biological. Right? So when they do these tests, they're basically like downloading off of your hard drive into the cloud, and your experiences is joining the experiences of many others around the world. Right? And this data is being used for them to make assessments of our species as a whole.
Did they create us?
I feel like they did, and that there was more than one. This is getting into an area that I'm nervous to talk about because, the connotations it could have, but I'm going to talk about it anyway.
Are they what you believe is the truth, or is what you've assessed to be the truth?
No, it's what I believe. It's what they have told me through direct questions. They don't really volunteer information, but they will answer a question. But they will only answer that question to the limits of your understanding. Right?
If they answered more, you wouldn't understand.
They and other races are what we have mythologically labeled our old gods. There was a time when they lived among us, they were here, and various species of man, I was told we're not all the same species, we're all created by different stock.
What you just heard has never been heard anywhere else. This is Connie Willis, the podcast. Learn more about Connie, her guests, and be sure to join her private membership shows, Blue Rock Talk and Connie After Dark, at ConnieWillis.com. Whistleblower.